Chapter 751. Sharon could understand why Janice did what she did in the past. How could any woman tolerate her husband taking care of another woman? Sharon was in a dilemma. If they didn't go, Olivia might overthink it. If they went, though, the two women might get into a fight if they met. Sharon, I can see that there's something off about this yard. To Sharon's surprise, Olivia stood up from the wheelchair. Staggering, she walked forward. Let's go back, Mrs. Miller. I want to see who exactly is being hidden there. Realizing that the situation was getting worse, Sharon hastily told someone to get Ethan here. Olivia had a cold look on her face when she saw Ethan striding over to her. Open the door. Let me go inside to have a look. Let's go back, Liv. You keep saying that you love me, right? Let's see who you love for real. Refusing to back down, Olivia glared at the bodyguard. Open the door. Ethan wanted to take her away by force, but when he remembered her current condition, he could only do as she asked. When the door opened, Olivia saw Mina and Irina chasing after butterflies in the yard. Olivia pointed at Irina. Is this your love for me? You tell me that you love me, but you're taking care of another girl in the dark. Ethan didn't know how to respond. He had explained it before, but even if he showed Olivia the DNA test results, she wouldn't believe that the children were hers. How could he explain things now? Let's go back inside, Liv. If you believe me, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Just then, Marina came out in a wheelchair as well. Miss Fordham, please don't misunderstand. Ethan and I have already cancelled our engagement. Now that I'm like this, I've never once thought of snatching anything from you. I just want a place that can shelter me. Please spare me and my children. Don't chase us out. I just hope that the children can see their father from time to time. You've been a mother before, so you should be able to understand me. The words sounded harmless enough, but every syllable was hurtful. Even though Olivia had come over to look for an opportunity, she was still hurt by Marina's words. Ethan swept a cold glare at Marina. Shut up. Go on, why are you stopping her from speaking? Ethan, what a nice plan you have there. You want to get us both. Liv, I don't, I was just. Ethan felt that there was something off about Olivia today. It was as if a usually gentle and reasonable young lady had suddenly started picking fights out on the streets. Fine, I'll give you one last chance today. Are you choosing me or this woman? To prevent Ethan from suspecting anything, Olivia could only act more convincingly. If you love me, drive her and her children out. Promise me that you won't see them again after tonight, and I'll forgive you. If not, I'm leaving the Miller residence. Ethan nodded, promising her so that she wouldn't get angry. All right, I'll do everything you say. Anything can be done as long as you don't get angry. Mr. Thorne, pack up Miss Carlton's things and send them out of the Miller residence. Olivia was stunned. Why weren't things playing out the way she had planned? Ethan cared a lot about Marina in the past, right? She had assumed that Ethan would hesitate, and then she could make use of that hesitance to make things worse. Ethan's reply was so decisive that she didn't even have a chance to elaborate. But Marina behaved exactly the way Olivia wanted. When Marina heard that she and the children were getting driven out, she was instantly in tears. Ethan, I only have these two children left. I don't have anything else. You promised them that you would take good care of us. You can't drive us out. Yes, that was how she should act. Olivia gave Marina a thumbs up in her heart. If Marina didn't act like this, she wouldn't be able to faint from getting too emotional later. Ethan waved his hand. Kelvin, escort Miss Carlton out of here. He had no mercy at all. At critical times like this, nothing was more important than Olivia's life. Marina was still sobbing. Olivia was building up her emotions when she heard a meow. Looking up, Olivia saw Snowball falling off the rooftop all of a sudden. With a thud, its body crashed in front of Olivia. Chapter 752. Blood splattered before Olivia's eyes, reminding her of the day Mona died. She froze on the spot, her eyes suddenly widening. It felt like a dream. Snowball was curled up in her arms just this morning, but now, it was lying at her feet, dying. Black blood flowed out of its mouth and nose. Olivia crouched stiffly. She had to be dreaming. Snowy, Please tell me you're joking. Olivia's voice trembled as her tone shifted. Reaching out, she wanted to hug Snowball, but Ethan pulled her into his arms. Don't touch it, Liv. Snowball was poisoned. The blood that flowed out of its body wasn't crimson but black. Olivia couldn't consider those things right now. She threw herself at Snowball at the risk of her own life. Snowy, wake up. Open your eyes and look at me. Liv. Ethan hugged her tight with both arms, stopping her from touching Snowball's body. Sharon was quick to react. She hastily got someone to clear up Snowball's body. But like a crazed woman, Olivia stomped toward Marina in a rage. Grabbing Marina's collar, she shouted, "It was you, wasn't it? If you don't like me, just come at me. Why would you do such a thing to a cat? It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me." Marina had just finished speaking when Olivia slapped her right on her face. "How dare you say that it wasn't you? Why would Snowball be in your yard? Marina, how cruel can you be? Haven't you learned your lesson after causing the deaths of Dad and Mom?" Olivia bombarded Marina with accusations, refusing to listen to a word of Marina's explanations. Marina ran over from a distance and grabbed the fabric of Olivia's pants. "Bad woman, don't hit my mom." Ethan pulled her away. "Liv, please calm down. Calm down." Olivia watched as people cleaned up Snowball's body and took it away. There was still blood on the ground. Snowball had kept her company through her youth. After Jeff died, she treated Snowball as the last surviving member of her family. But today, Snowball had left her too. Olivia felt tears stinging her eyes when she thought of that, and her heart grew heavy. With the strong emotions pent up in her chest, she coughed up blood. Then, her vision turned black as she fainted. Olivia never thought that this would become the last straw. At the cost of Snowball's death, Olivia was hurriedly sent to the hospital again. After all the fuss, Dr. Tucker was furious. "What sort of a husband are you? It has only been a short while. I can't believe you provoked her so much that she fainted again." Ethan wanted to slap himself as well. He had placed Marina in the Miller residence just so that he could keep an eye on her in case she caused trouble again. But he never expected Olivia to talk to Marina of her own accord. Snowball even died in the process. Not only did he not expect it, but Olivia also never saw it coming. "I'll leave her in your hands, Dr. Tucker. She's so unlucky to have gotten a husband like you." When Olivia woke up, she found Keith next to her. "You did it." "No, someone killed Snowball." Olivia's eyes were red. Even if she wanted to escape, she would never do it over Snowball's dead body. Snowball's death couldn't have been an accident. Someone must have done it on purpose. It didn't matter if that person wanted to provoke her with Snowball's death or if they wanted to poison her by drugging her food, which Snowball ate by accident. Either way, they were targeting Olivia. Snowball had died in her place. It would have lived for a few more years otherwise. Olivia gripped the bed sheets tightly as tears rolled down her face. She wouldn't let Snowball die in vain. Chapter 753. Keith continued coaxing her. "Olivia, you have to pull yourself together. Don't get affected by this incident. You have to take care of your health." "I know, Keith." Now, her desire to live was stronger than it had ever been. She refused to just be led by the nose and be manipulated time and again. Her mind was filled with images of Mona's face and Snowball's dead body. She wouldn't let that person have their way. "Keith, let's proceed with our plans after this." "All right." The Miller family was thrown into chaos after Olivia's incident. All the household staff stood in a row with their heads bowed. Snowball's autopsy report was released. Snowball was found to have died from a potent toxin. Before it died, the toxin had affected its nerves, and that was why it had fallen off the roof and died. Its cause of death was poisoning. An old cat like Snowball wouldn't eat random stuff. There were some undigested pieces of dried fish in its stomach. After some testing, it was found that the dried fish was laced with a potent toxin. Marina sat in the wheelchair, her face swollen as she hastily explained, "Ethan, how could I possibly get poison in my current condition? That cat did play in my yard 2 days ago. Marina liked it, so I didn't chase it away. I had no idea that it was Olivia's cat. I swear it wasn't me." To prevent Marina from causing trouble, her meals and daily routine were strictly controlled. She was bound to a wheelchair too, so she wouldn't have had the chance to get her hands on poison. The Miller residence was too big, and not every spot had surveillance cameras. Someone must have fed Snowball in a certain blind spot. The person who fed it must have been in the yard. There were professionals in charge of Olivia's meals, so it was too difficult to poison her. Hence, that person wanted to provoke Olivia with the cat's death, using that to speed up her death. They wanted to kill Olivia by breaking her heart. They had poisoned Snowball, and the viciousness behind that action was immeasurable. The most terrifying fact was that someone had committed the act in the Miller residence, right under Ethan's nose. No one's owning up, huh? Then remain standing until someone admits to it. Before the sky turned dark, someone stepped forward of their own accord. It was a maid in charge of the garden. She liked Snowball a lot, and she was sometimes seen giving Snowball scratches. At that moment, she was kneeling in front of Ethan while sobbing uncontrollably. "Mr. Miller, I seriously didn't know that the dried fish was poisoned. I love Snowball so much. Why would I hurt it? Where did you get the dried fish from?" "It's from my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson. She said that cats love dried fish, and she said that she had made the dried fish herself, so they're clean. I saw that the fish she was drying did indeed look quite clean. So, I got a bag from her. I didn't know that it was poisoned at all." Ethan didn't expect these people to find a way into every opening. They had thought of every possible way. "Brent, look into this Mrs. Wilson." Mrs. Wilson's connections were simple. Soon, there was a response. They found that a young woman had told her to do it. Brent even showed Ethan a photo taken from a surveillance camera nearby. "No need to investigate further, Mr. Miller. It's the work of Miss Miller." Leia's face was clearly shown in the photo. She didn't even hide her face as if she was letting herself be seen on purpose. Ethan clenched his fists tightly. "She's using this method to tell me that she wants Liv dead." Ethan and the Fordhams were sworn enemies at this point, but Leia kept making things worse. She wanted to make it so that Ethan and Olivia would never have any chances of going back. "She's trying to drive me crazy." Ethan sighed. Leia would stop at nothing to separate the two. She was also slowly pushing Olivia into the depths of hell. Chapter 754. After what happened with Snowball, Olivia was deeply shocked. Since then, she had been drained of all energy, and the positive changes from before were completely gone. Ethan was anxious when he saw that, but he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't endure the pain in Olivia's stead, be it physical or mental pain. Olivia was getting weaker by the day, and there was still no news of Colin. Ethan was anxious and panicking. On top of that, Olivia also refused to see Ethan. He could only check in on her by looking through the glass outside the door and asking the doctor about her. These days, Olivia would just lie in bed and wipe her tears most of the time. Sharon and Janice took turns to persuade her, but it wasn't very effective. She was suffering from a mental illness, so even the best doctors couldn't cure it. Janice patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Mental illnesses require mental healing. Olivia has lost her will to live. You should mentally prepare yourself." Everyone told him the same thing, but even now, he still wasn't prepared to be separated from Olivia. Ethan walked hesitantly into Olivia's ward. She was curled up into a tiny ball under the blanket. She looked pitiful and weak, and the liveliness from before was completely gone. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen if she hadn't gotten married to him regardless of everything back then. He wondered if she would have had a different ending. Olivia slowly looked up at him. "You're here." Reaching out, Ethan tucked her hair on her face behind her ear. "Liv, can you keep living? Please, I'm begging you." She stared straight at the white ceiling above her. "Ethan, just take me away. I don't want to die in the hospital. It's so cold here." "Nonsense. You're not going to die. I had a dream about the two children last night. They told me that they missed me a lot. I want to reunite with them now." Ethan choked. His voice was hoarse as he said, "Liv, there must still be a way." But Olivia ignored him, saying, looking at the calendar, "Connor's birthday is in a few days, isn't it?" "Yes. I quite like that kid. I want to celebrate his birthday with him for once. Ethan held her hand. He's also your child, Liv. Believe me, I treated Marina like that to repay a favor. I never loved her at all. I owed Kurt. But Olivia couldn't be bothered to listen to those lies. She interrupted him in annoyance. I don't like Irina and Marina. Can't we just make it the three of us? Ethan had no choice but to agree. Sure, anything you say. Following Olivia's instructions, Ethan brought her and Connor to a wooden house by the beach. Olivia sat on the balcony while Connor leaned against her with the yellow ball in his arms. The glow of the sunset shone warmly on the two, and it was quite a peaceful sight. Ethan was just done preparing dinner in the kitchen when he came out and saw that scene. Connor leaned into Olivia's arms obediently. Mommy. Olivia caressed his head gently. If this child truly were her son, she could die without regrets. In her last days, she could finally live the life of her dreams. She could have a happy family, and she would have given birth to an adorable son for Ethan. The days were simple and cheerful. When Ethan came back from work, he would bring a small cake with him. Connor happily danced around him. Daddy, you're so nice. From a distance, Olivia watched Ethan and Connor interact with each other. This was she had always dreamed of. As she watched, she smiled. As she was smiling, she began to cry. She wondered if she was laughing at her fantasies in the past or at herself now, who had lost everything. Mommy, come and eat cake. The tiny Connor tried to move the wheelchair over to the dining table. When Olivia saw that, she felt warmth welling up in her heart. When he hugged her to sleep last night, he said, Mommy, when I'm all grown up, I'll be able to protect you. Chapter 755. Connor had no idea how long Olivia had cried because of those words. It was a candlelit dinner. Ethan lit the candles for Connor. Olivia and Ethan sang the birthday song for Connor together. Connor clasped his hands together, earnestly making a wish. What wish did you make? Olivia asked discreetly. Connor smiled. It won't come true if I say it. He wished that Olivia would get better soon and that she and Ethan would always be by his side. The candlelight flickered. Looking at Olivia's gentle face, Ethan wished that this moment would last forever. Connor was smiling happily, and Ethan was reminded of the day of his third birthday. Of course, his son wouldn't have a childhood like that. He would do his best to love Olivia and Connor. Olivia smiled very joyfully tonight. She allowed him to fool around and laughed with him. She even shared a bed with Ethan, which was a rare sight. Connor slept between the two. Olivia said, sighing, if that child was still alive, would they be just like this? Ethan wanted to explain, but Olivia refused to believe that Connor was none other than that child. Liv, I've been very happy these days. It feels as if we never had a conflict. It's not a bad thing that the child is gone. If they were still alive, they'd suffer because of me. Olivia was quite talkative tonight. Most of the time, Ethan was just listening to her. Her voice was very slow, but Ethan felt anxious for some reason. He felt as if he was going to lose Olivia soon. When it was late at night, Connor had already fallen asleep when Olivia planted a kiss on his cheek. Connor obediently snuggled in her arms. He was even mumbling, Mommy. She gently caressed the child's face, seemingly thinking of something. Feeling uneasy, Ethan finally fell asleep soundly in the later hours of the night. Olivia didn't sleep at all. Countless memories flashed across her mind. The first half of her life had been wonderful but also quite tragic. Finally, when the sun was about to rise, she let go of Connor. Ethan had just gone to sleep then. It was the time when he was in deep sleep. Olivia carefully got out of bed. Then, she put on her shoes. This time, she didn't feel any longing at all. She didn't even look back. Since she had already decided to do it from the start, she would not look back anymore. She wanted to get rid of her hesitant self. In the past few days, she had gotten a clear grasp of the villa's structure. She slowly slid down the ventilation pipe next to the balcony. She had put on a decent act these days. In others' eyes, she didn't even have the energy to walk. No one would have suspected that she was pretending just for Ethan. Taking off her shoes, she placed them on the reef. Then, she took off the wedding ring on her finger. Even if she was burdened by a severe illness, she could still feel long-lost happiness. She no longer had any hindrances or restraints. She had finally struggled free of the shackles, and she felt like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon. Step by step, Olivia walked toward the sea. Ethan had only slept for 3 hours before he woke up, startled. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Connor was still in his embrace, but Olivia was missing. At a glance, he could see that the bathroom was empty. Ethan immediately turned and got off the bed. Walking around in the villa in strides, he shouted, "Liv! Liv, where are you?" He looked in every corner of the villa, but he couldn't find her anywhere. Kelvin also said that Olivia didn't leave. "Don't worry, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Miller is very weak, so how can she escape? Unless..." Everyone thought of the same possibility. Thinking of the words she said last night, Ethan could figure out the next words to Kelvin's sentence, "unless she chose suicide." Ethan dashed over to the balcony. Looking down, he only saw cliffs. He couldn't see anyone there. Kelvin also said that it wasn't quite possible. If Olivia jumped from here, she would have fallen onto the rocks underneath. If she wanted to go to the beach, she would have to go down. She couldn't have done that in her condition. Ethan had already jumped over the railing and ran out. He had a bad feeling about this. The words Olivia said last night seemed to be concluding her life. As the ocean breeze blew in his direction, he ran toward the coastline. He almost tripped and fell a few times. When he finally arrived at the beach, he only saw a pair of white shoes along with a letter placed on a rock. The wedding ring on the letter shone brilliantly. Chapter 756. With trembling hands, Ethan picked up the wedding ring and the letter. The act of opening a letter was so simple, but his hands kept trembling as if he had Parkinson's. Brent said in a low voice, "Mr. Miller, let me do it." It didn't matter that much whether he read the letter or not. Everyone had already guessed the ending. Still, Ethan took out the letter in terror and agony. The familiar handwriting came into sight. In the past, she would write him letters in secret when he was out on business trips. She didn't know the address, so she would put the words she wanted to say into a bottle and then bury it in the garden. After he discovered it by accident, every time he came back, the first thing he would do was to go to that secret hole and dig around to check if there was new mail. Back then, she wrote like an adorable teenage girl. But this letter was different. Not many words were written on it, but every stroke conveyed farewell. "Ethan, it's too painful to live. I don't want to hold on anymore. Farewell. I only desire the sweet release of death. Death has done us part. Finally, Olivia." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes, and it began to drizzle. Drops of water dripped onto the letter. No one could tell if it was Ethan's tears or the rain from the sky. Holding the letter to his heart, Ethan slowly got on his knees. He mumbled, "Liv, I was wrong, come back. Don't die. I should be the one to die instead." He gripped the ring tightly in his hand. She had once sold and thrown away this ring, but in the end, he still managed to find it and bring it back. He would never forget Olivia's smile when she put on the ring. "After I put on this ring, I'll be your woman. The rest of my life is yours, hubby." In the period when he gave her the cold shoulder, she never once took the ring off. After she lost weight, he even had the ring adjusted a size smaller. Now, the ring had returned to its owner. She gave her farewells and said that death had done them part. How cruel. They were so deeply in love in the past, but now, they ended up being separated forever. Ethan kissed Olivia's ring. Then, he took off his ring as well. He placed the two rings neatly together. He slowly got up. Staggering, he walked toward the beach. His mind was filled with images of Olivia's face. "Ethan, don't leave me alone. I'm scared of the dark. Let me go. Please don't treat me like this." Ethan mumbled, "Liv, don't be afraid. I'm coming to keep you company right now." It was very dark at the bottom of the ocean. She must be terrified. He couldn't imagine how painful it must have been for her when the water rushed into her lungs. She chose to leave this way, so he would go the same way to keep her company. He thought, "Liv, I told you. Even in death, I won't let you go. Let us die together, all right? With me around, you wouldn't have to be scared of the dark anymore." The ocean breeze blew toward him, bringing with it a hazy mist. The surface of the sea was fogged over, just like his chaotic life. He had already lost direction. He continued to think, Liv, did you think of me when you left? Be it love or hate, we'll leave it all behind. From today onward, we'll spend eternity together. Calvin and Brent sensed that something was off. They hastily stopped Ethan. Mr. Miller, please calm down. You still have Master Connor. You can't die. Yes, Master Connor has already lost his mother. If you die, he won't have a father either. The word, father, pierced Ethan's heart. He recalled his childhood, but he only hesitated for a moment before making his choice. Tell Mom that I'm sorry I can't be around for her anymore. Tell her to take good care of Connor. With that, Ethan flung himself into the sea without consideration. Mr. Miller. Chapter 757. In the Miller residence, the man on the bed moved his fingers. Then, he shouted, Liv. Opening his eyes, he sat up and looked around him in terror. Janice sighed in relief. You're finally awake. You've been unconscious for 3 whole days. Ethan's memories were still stuck at the beach. He hastily asked, Mom. Liv, did you find Liv? Janice's heart ached. She didn't dare tell him the ending. Ethan, please prepare yourself for this. Olivia is, she is. No, that can't be. Liv can't be dead. Ethan couldn't accept the truth. He got out of bed barefooted and then ran outside the door. Liv, where are you? Are you avoiding me? Liv, stop hiding. Ethan searched the place, feeling desperate and lost. He walked into the bedroom on the first floor. Everything in the room remained the same as when Olivia left. The clean bedding was neatly folded. The flowers in the vase were the ones picked from the yard a week ago. The flowers had wilted, their heads drooping as if life had been drained out of them. Olivia still hadn't finished the book on the desk. It lay open on the page she had stopped at previously. Everything remained the same in the room, but Olivia was no longer there. Ethan opened the door to the yard and went to the spot she loved the most. He could only see a wheelchair there, along with flowers that bloomed vividly. Like a crazed man, Ethan ran around in the garden while shouting anxiously, Liv, where are you? I'm begging you, please just come out. Liv, I was wrong. I swear, I've repented for real. I'll do anything just for you to come back. His feet had turned bloody from getting cut by the stones, but Ethan didn't care. He didn't know how long he had been running. In the end, he knelt under the flower rack with tears on his face. He looked at his finger, at the spot where the ring should have been. Like Olivia, the ring had completely disappeared from his world. Footsteps rang in his ears. As if he had regained hope, Ethan shouted, Liv. He whipped his head around, but the person who arrived was Kelth. Stop looking. Olivia has already left. Keith played a video on his phone. It must have been footage taken from a surveillance camera on the cliff. On the screen, Olivia took off her ring and her shoes. Then, she walked slowly into the depths of the sea. She had never once looked back. She was resolved to leave. When the sea covered her head, Ethan felt himself suffocating. Liv, you're so cruel. He thought that their relationship had gotten better, but he had no idea that it was just an act Olivia carefully put on. She still left in the end. She chose to leave him in this way. Keith sighed. You have to understand her. It's already a huge feat for her to have held out for so long. The pain in her body was too much, and every living second was torture. She didn't have a better choice. Why not? I'm already looking for Colin. She could have waited a little longer, and she might have been saved then. Mr. Miller, I won't deny that you love Olivia deeply. But you don't know how to love someone at all. You've never considered what Olivia wanted, and you only forced her to live according to your demands. She was a person, not a pet. She had her own thoughts, and she would also feel sad as well. Did you know? You left scars all over her body, and you reopened the wounds time and again. She was just a meek woman, yet she had suffered losses 3 times. She lost her family, her friends, and even her child. Even if her illness could be cured, how long would it take for the wounds in her heart to recover? Keith looked at Ethan, who was kneeling on the ground in agony. There was not a trace of sympathy in his eyes. He said coldly, "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller is dead. Please accept my condolences." Chapter 758. Once again, Ethan went back to the sea. Calvin and Brent looked exhausted. They had shifts, but they hadn't rested much in the past few days. There were dark circles under their eyes. They were all too aware of how important Olivia was to Ethan. They had added countless men to this operation, and they were using all their resources to look for Olivia. When they saw Ethan, they hastily went up to him. "Mr. Miller." Ethan's eyes were red. He was wearing a black suit, but he didn't look as upright as he used to be. He looked more haggard instead. When he spoke, his voice was a little hoarse. "Did you find anything?" Brent shook his head. "Not for now. The area Mrs. Miller disappeared in is a little complicated. Back then, she encountered an offshore current, and she was brought far out to sea. The area over there happens to be a fault zone, and it's more than 300 feet deep. The visibility isn't too great either, so it's more difficult to salvage anything there." Ethan clenched his fists tightly, turning his knuckles white. He stared in the distance. "Let me do it." He put on a diving suit and secured an oxygen tank on his back. Then, he followed the salvage team into the depths of the ocean. The deeper they went, the lower their visibility became. They could see many schools of fish, corals, and other marine life. It had been 3 days. Even if Olivia's body wasn't eaten by the fishes, it would have bloated beyond recognition. Ethan feared that he might see her body, but he also wanted to find her as soon as possible. He didn't want her to stay in the sea all alone. He thought, "Liv, don't be scared. I'm coming to take you home. We'll never be apart in the future, all right?" Hence, Ethan dove into the sea multiple times to search for Olivia. He did it until he ran out of energy, and he kept at it from sunrise until sunset. Still, he couldn't find any traces of her. He lay on the deck, facing the sky. Looking at the starry sky above his head, he panted heavily. At that moment, he was so tired that he couldn't even lift a finger. "Don't go into the sea anymore, Mr. Miller. You'll be in danger if this keeps up." Ethan didn't say a word. He felt as if someone had sucked his soul dry. "We still haven't found her after so many days. Do you think Liv is still alive?" Even though everyone felt that it wasn't quite possible, no one wanted to hurt him at that moment. That may be the case. Mrs. Miller has survived so many difficulties that she might still be in one piece. "Mr. Miller, you have to take care of your body. You still have things to do after this." Ethan suddenly shot up. "Yes, I still have many things to do. I have a feeling that Liv didn't die." Brent asked curiously, "How so, Mr. Miller? If Liv wanted to commit suicide because of her extreme pain, why wouldn't she choose a simpler method? She could have used a blade or drowned herself in the bathtub. Even cutting her wrist would have been much faster. Why would she plan so much and go about it the long way?" Brent said, "Mr. Miller, you're saying that Mrs. Miller was putting on an act to deceive you." "It may be possible. If my guess is correct, she didn't want to die at all. Instead, she has a very strong desire to live. She just wants to use this method to completely get away from me." Ethan had recovered his calmness as he analyzed Olivia's condition in an orderly manner. "Assuming that you're right, Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller really did enter the ocean. She couldn't have survived on her own, so she must have had someone help her out. It's Keith. Now that I think about it, he didn't look sad at all when this incident happened. He knew that Liv didn't die. I'm the one to blame. I was so absorbed in Liv's death that I didn't realize it right." "Away." A look of joy flashed across Kelvin's eyes. "If that's the case, we only have to control Keith to locate Mrs. Miller. Mr. Miller, I'll look into it right away." Chapter 759. Ethan glanced at the stars in the sky. A helpless smile appeared on his face. "Even if she didn't die and I brought her back after finding her, history is only going to repeat itself. I'll only be making her sad again. If I let her stay with me, she'll be like flowers in a vase, which will wilt in no time. Perhaps, she'll live a better life if I let her go." Calvin and Brent were in disbelief when they heard Ethan saying those words. "Mr. Miller, are you truly willing to let Mrs. Miller go? In the past, I always wanted her to stay with me. But accidents kept happening, and Liv now hates me to the core. If this is what she truly wants, then I'll let her have her way." Ethan sighed. "Those are all my speculations, and I don't have any evidence to back them up. For now, verify if she's still alive. Check her phone location and Keith's movements in the past week. Remember, don't alert them." "Understood, Mr. Miller. Would you like to go back first?" Ethan shook his head. "If Liv is still alive, she'll be keeping an eye on my movements. I don't want her to be scared, so I'll spend a few days at sea." In his craze, Ethan would focus solely on salvaging her body. He wouldn't give up after just one day. He knew Olivia, and of course, Olivia knew him very well too. But he never expected that a day would come when he would let Olivia go for the sake of protecting her. For the next few days, the salvage operation continued. Brent also discovered something. Mrs. Miller's phone was last seen at the beach. It has probably sunk to the bottom of the ocean by now. I looked into Keith's recent movements. In the past few days, he's been going to work and clocking out regularly. After work, he would go shopping, have dinner, and watch movies with his girlfriend. Everything is normal, Ethan said. The more normal he looks, the more abnormal it is in reality. After all, he's only putting on an act. Yes, I also discovered that he withdrew some money some time ago. It's in cash. In this day and age, who would go outside with so much cash? I'm suspecting that he had prepared this sum for Mrs. Miller. Have you found Liv's whereabouts? Not for now. I've already checked all modes of transport. People have to verify their identities before getting on any transport these days, so we'll be notified right away if Mrs. Miller leaves. Do you think she went by sea? After a span of a few days, she must have left international waters. Ethan shook his head. No, Liv still hasn't left. How are you so sure, Mr. Miller? Firstly, the most dangerous place would be the safest. If Keith wants to send Liv out to sea, they can't take the official routes, so they can only use hidden methods. That'll narrow down our search. Liv was already caught once, so she won't risk her life again. To her, we're no different from demons. She thinks that if we catch her again, we won't let her go easily. She has no choice but to treat this chance very seriously. Without a 100% guarantee, she won't leave. Secondly, Liv's body is still very weak. She can't move long distances in her current condition. The seas are rough, so it's not a suitable condition for her to recuperate. Also, if something happens, she won't be able to get medical help in time. So, she couldn't have gone out to sea. Brent asked, "Then what are you suggesting, Mr. Miller?" "She's still here. If you can't find anything with Keith, look up the Tuckers instead. It's very easy to expose your identity if you rent a house. She might be lodging in the Tuckers' house. What about you? I'll go back and put on another act. Remember, if you find her, don't do anything. Don't give up on searching for Colin either. Try your best to protect her in the shadows." Chapter 760. Brent said, "I feel like you've changed, Mr. Miller. In the past, I always thought that my arrangements were the best decisions for her. But in reality, I've hurt her time and again. Moreover, it's not a bad thing for Liv to fake her death. She can fool me and also her enemy, so this can indeed be the safest route for her. She doesn't have to constantly worry about being assassinated." Brent said, "So, Mr. Miller, other than putting on this act to deceive Mrs. Miller, you're also trying to fool the enemy. Only then can we have more time to investigate. This is the time when that person will let down their guard. But before that, I have something to do." "What is it?" "I have to clear some obstacles." News of Olivia dying from her incurable disease quickly spread. Olivia's funeral was held tonight, and almost everyone from the upper-class society attended it. Janice's eyes were red. She quite liked this daughter-in-law of hers, but sadly, Olivia passed away too early. Harold still hadn't recovered. Standing in the hall with a dazed look on his face, he asked Edmund, "Who died?" Edmund had a pained look on his face. "Please stop asking, Mr. Harold. The others were discussing it as well. I heard that Mr. Miller loves his wife very much. It can't be that much, can it?" Wasn't he preparing to marry another woman some time ago? You're right. Mrs. Miller is such a pitiful woman. Marina didn't have the right to attend the funeral. But when she heard of Olivia's death, she was so overwhelmed that she sobbed. The day had finally come. Olivia was dead, so no one would snatch Ethan from her anymore. Fate was on her side. She had finally outlasted Olivia. When Ethan made his appearance, the people who knew him were all shocked. He was still wearing a formal suit. His usually clean chin now had stubble on it. He had a haggard look on his face, and his eyes were red. He looked like he had aged a decade. He had lost a lot of weight in a short period. Keith almost couldn't recognize him. Keith had expected Ethan to be greatly affected by Olivia's death, but he didn't expect Ethan to be affected this much. It was as if Ethan had turned into another person. Ignoring everyone's gazes, Ethan slowly walked up to Olivia's photo. The photo was taken in her student days. Back then, she was innocent and cheery, and her smile was radiant. Ethan reached out to touch the photo. He wished that time would freeze at that moment. That way, Olivia wouldn't have to go through so much suffering. He recalled everything they had gone through together. He had stripped her of all her strength, pride, and dignity and then trampled them under his feet. He had twisted her into an extremely pitiful woman. He thought, I'm sorry, Liv. From today onward, I'll set you free. I know that you can't forgive me for what I've done. I'll atone for it with my whole life. A single tear streamed down his face. He shed that tear for the sake of their past. From today onward, he would start over as well. Ethan, a woman's voice rang out. While everyone was being emotional, the voice startled them. They instantly looked at the woman. Everly was dressed in all black except for a white flower, which adorned her chest. She spotted Olivia's photo hanging in the middle right away. When she received the news in Arlandia, she didn't quite believe it at first. But at that moment, when she saw the haggard Ethan, she knew that Olivia had died for real. Everyone was wondering who this woman was. Could it be a homewrecker causing trouble? Perhaps some drama was about to play out. Everly rushed over to Ethan. Raising her hand, she slapped Ethan across the face.